So ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to those of you who are joining us from the Americas. Good afternoon to those who are joining us from Europe, and a good evening for those who are located further to the east in Asia and in the Asia-Pacific region. My name is Sebastian Bruns. I'm the head of the Center for Maritime Strategy and Security at the Institute for Security Policy at Kiel University. The ISPK is Europe's leading think tank in terms of maritime strategy and maritime security. For those of you who don't know our institution or don't know me, we are a non-profit organization, and I cordially invite you to join, to look at our website, kielseapowerseries.com or ispk.org. Follow us on Twitter. You can follow this event under the hashtag America's Navies, but also you can keep up to date on what we do using Facebook, using Twitter, at Seapower Series at ISPK. There's lots of ways to stay in touch, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the fourth session of America's Navies, a series of events that looks at maritime issues, maritime security, maritime strategy issues pertaining to the Americas. What started out as in the nucleus as wondering what the US and the Canadian navies would be all about has blossomed into a very broad session of seminars. I'm very thankful to the speakers we could get on board here, all these different topics. As you all know, this session is on the record. It will be recorded. It will be featured on our website and our YouTube channel, so that others may learn from what we hear here from the discussion. Quite nicely, without much of our management, we've sort of moving from North America. We had two sessions on North America to now Latin America, and now this session is covering the Caribbean and the Colombian, the northern part of South America, if you will, Colombian Navy. We will have a final session, session 5, this Thursday. Hendrik, our research aide, will share the link in towards the end of the seminar, and that session will look at the Brazilian Navy and also at the influence of the Chinese fishing fleet in South America. So two very timely subjects, and I'm also very thankful to at least one of our former speakers, Professor Mercogliano, and one of this week's other speakers, Dr. Resende, who are also joining us here today as in the audience. The way we work this out is I will briefly introduce the two speakers for today, and then they will have a go at it. And after the two presentations, we'll have the moderated Q&A session. It works very, very simply. You simply type something in the chat box like, I have a question, or this is my question, and then we will have a list, and you will be asked to unmute yourself. You're also obviously invited to keep yourself muted until you want to contribute something. That way we reduce the side talks and the potential for technical difficulties. So having said all that, it's my great pleasure to welcome two distinguished naval and maritime security specialists as today's speakers. We will kick off with Samuel Rivera Páez, who's got a doctor cum laude in social and human sciences, and he's a captain retired of the Colombian Navy. He's a professor at the Colombian National War College, and he also collaborates as consultant for the Caribbean and Latin America, in the Global Maritime Crime Program of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. He has published several well-read articles, book chapters, and edited books on maritime affairs, such as Maritime Interests of Colombia, Proposals and Reflections for the Construction of a Maritime Country, and Maritime Security, Counterterrorism Lessons from Maritime Piracy and Narcotics Interdiction. Professor, welcome aboard. Our second speaker for the day is Rafael Uribe Neira. He graduated in June 2020, so June last year, with distinction from with a master's degree in Peace and Conflict Studies at the Otto von Guericke University in Magdeburg in Germany. Rafael focuses his research on civil-military relations, narratives in security aid, and lots of pop culture, something that I very much applaud, and hope we can talk about that a little bit too. Since his time as a research assistant at the Institute for Security Policy at Kiel University, so our institution, in the fall of 2018, and more so as an intern at the United Nations in Colombia in winter 2018-2019, he developed a keen interest in the Caribbean and its global ties, and certainly in maritime security. So you can see what an internship with the Center for Maritime Strategy and Security gets you. It gets you into a lot of maritime trouble if you're not careful. Rafael, it's great to see you back again here, and welcome to you as well. And Sam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sebastian. I'm going to share my screen, so maybe let me a minute, please. So thank you so much for this invitation. First of all, I want to say thank you to the Center for Maritime Strategy and Security of the Institute for Security Policy at Kiel University, to Sebastian and Rafael, who was the person who invited me to present something about the maritime security in the Caribbean Basin. It focuses in international regional cooperation. I want to say thank you. Second, I want to say that I am not speaking as a professor of the National War College in Colombia right now. I am speaking as a maritime consultant individual, and from the Maritime Consultant Group. I'm not representing any institutional position or statements that the National War College could make. I also want to say that well, when they first connect me, I say that, well, they say me that we want to talk about Latin American in general, and I prefer to speak specifically about the Caribbean Basin, because I think that is the part of the region which is more involved with the European Union and with the NATO operations or NATO countries. So first of all, I want to say that a quick agenda. I will talk about our general background, some cooperation mechanisms in the Caribbean region, some findings in maritime security cooperation, some key success factors, conclusions, and some recommendations. So, as a background, the main purpose of international cooperation is always speak about building bridges, promoting peace and stability, and establishing trust, with some sharing goals and efforts to achieve in terms of regional, when states are talking about. The Caribbean region is a very complex region in the world. As any other region with diversity and as with the different actors and different type of states, in the Caribbean region, we have independent states, we have dependent territories, we have associated states, we have different kind of territories, which made, in some sense, a problematic issues in terms of connectivity, trust, and other things. We have different languages, and the languages and cultures are very, very different. We have the Anglophone culture in the Caribbean. We have the French culture in the Caribbean. We have the Dutch culture in the Caribbean. We have the Spanish culture in the Caribbean. So we have different proximities in terms of legal frameworks, in terms of cultural frameworks, in terms of different kind of things. So in general, we can say that the security in the Caribbean region is seen this day with a combination of expectancy and apprehension. And the expectancy and apprehension comes from the different kind of threats that we can find in the region. Second, we can say that also that complexity could be the word that best describes the inside of security, of maritime security in the Caribbean, because we have a small island, because we have big countries, because we have extra regional powers trying to get involved in the Caribbean region. So we have different types of actors and situation to manage. The vulnerabilities of the regions are also the result of several factors, sometimes acting in combination the transnational crime is very powerful in the region, so they can make different things in each country, in each separate country, but also as a region itself. The most important location feature of the region's physical geography is proximity. You can find, if you in a few minutes we are going to see how we have different islands, and the proximity between this island, each one is a separate state. The proximity is a very important issue because it is changing. When you have some particular events, you can move from one territorial waters to other territorial waters very quickly, and that's very problematic. The illegal drug trade has fueled high levels of violence in the Caribbean region, as well as the boosted of other kinds of criminality like traffic humans, arms, contraband, and the formation of gangs. And finally, we can say that another crime that has been enhancing importance in the region is the illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. So we also can say why is complex the region? Because we have the Panama Channel, the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal moves around 5% of the world maritime trade, and moves more or less 51% of the Asia and between the connection, the trade between the Asia and the East Coast of the United States. So it's very important. It moves around 6% of the trade between Europe and the West Coast of the United States. So Panama Canal is a very important point of contact for the region. But also we have many choke points for maritime trade that are very important, close to Dominican Republic, close to Puerto Rico, close to Trinidad and Tobago, and close to in Cuba, between Cuba and in the Yucatan, are choke points that are very important for the trade in the region and in the international commerce. We also have maritime delimitation disputes. As you can see in this presentation, we have, if you look for a space without jurisdiction, you are not going to find any space in the Caribbean region. We don't find any space without jurisdiction. So and we have many different delimitation disputes right now that unfortunately make some kind of distrust between the different countries. So in this and finally, we have some unconventional threats that in some sense becomes conventional threats. For example, drug trade. The drug trade right now is an unconventional threat that becomes a function as a conventional threat. You know, maybe you have heard something about the problem that in the gas and oil drilling platform attacks in the Gulf of Mexico right now. Pemex reports between 2016 and 2018 approximately 400 attacks in the Gulf of Mexico and losses around $12 million in losses. It's not big piracy attacks. It's just robbery. It's the robbery of GPS systems. Is the robbery of communication systems. But it's a lot of money in 2 or 3 years in attacks, and it's many attacks. And right now we have another kind of attacks to some ships navigating around the Gulf of Mexico. But we also have problems in the region of Trinidad and Tobago and the coast of Venezuela right now. We have a lot of attacks to other kind of vessels, for example, to the armed robbery for tourist or craft or yacht. Are 61 cases reported in 2017, and it's a similar number for 2018 and 2019. This is a very good report from Ocean Beyond Piracy in 2017, which report many different robbery or attacks or armed robbery to tourism in the region. And maritime tourism is very important in the region because many of the small islands and the countries in the region has received a lot of the money from maritime tourism. So if we have problems with yachts and other kind of tourism boats, we are going to have problems with tourism, with cruise, and right now, after the pandemic, also we have problems with all the cruise industry. So it's a issue very important for the Caribbean region. And we have emerging threats as the drug trafficking and the drug trading in the Caribbean. The Caribbean region serve as bridge from South America and North America and Europe. And we have many different types of drug trade in this sense. We have containers, we have small yacht trade, we have trade with semi-submersible, and we have another kind of so different non-state actors becomes very important, and they use the region as for their efforts and for their different activities. So then is when we try to say that always, unfortunately, crime sometimes goes further and goes one step before the authorities, and they have very interesting ways to create and innovate. Last year, we in 2019, we have the first semi-submersible with around three tons of cocaine arriving to the coast of Galicia in Spain. And in that moment, we have that question that what happened when an unconventional threat start to be conventional? And what I say, what happened when an unconventional threat? Because for many countries in the European Union and in different parts of the world, the drug trade is an unconventional trade. It's an emerging trade, but it's not conventional trade. For many of the countries in South America, and for some countries such as Colombia or Venezuela or other countries, a small island in the Caribbean, the drug trade becomes it starts to be a conventional trade because it starts to destroy the social fabric and destroy the many different and affects many institutions in the countries. And for that reason, we need to start to see the drug trade as a conventional trade. So we have to see, for example, in the case of Colombia, the big efforts that all the authorities are making in trying to stop the problem of drug trade coming from Colombia, obviously. I'm sure that Rafael are going to speak something more about the Colombian case. So I'm not going to discuss too much about that, but obviously, if we have the possibility to produce around 1,600 tons, and we just capture in the world around 4,000 or 5,000 or 500, we are saying that we affecting 30 or 40% the drug trade and the maritime domain is used for all those organizations to trade the illicit drugs. So in this case, this is the results of one study that I made with some colleagues about cooperation mechanisms in the Caribbean. We have international organizations, we have different international associations in the Caribbean. In the international organization, we have United Nations, the Organization of American States also works a lot. The Caribbean community works in the region. We have international associations such as the police community of the excuse me, I'm going to of the Americas. Association of the Caribbean Commissioners of Police. We have also regional security initiatives, mainly supported by the United States. We have the Central America Regional Security Initiative. We have the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative. We have the Regional Security System, which is one of the most interesting forms of association and cooperation in the Caribbean, because it's a cooperative mechanism where different countries allows a regional regional initiative to works with the assets and with the different elements in all the countries in the regional security system. We have the Joint Interagency Task Force in the South Command, and we have CARICOM Impacts also. That is a very interesting regional security initiative that almost includes just the Anglophone countries. But we don't have any, as such as we are going to see in the next slide, we don't have any regional, a really regional cooperation mechanism. We have law enforcement mechanism. We right now have operations such as the OPBAD operation between Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, and United States to combat drug trafficking. We have also Orion, the Orion operation that I think that Rafael are going to mention or talking about when he speaks about the Colombian case, because Orion is a Colombian initiative to cooperate with different countries. We have the Hammer operation is led by United States. We have also agreements, and the agreements are very important in this case. The shipwrighter agreements are the U.S. initiative to work in other jurisdictional waters, trying to combat all kinds of international crime. We have interdiction agreements, and we have the San Jose Treaty. The San Jose Treaty is a Dutch and Costa Rican initiative working with United Nations, and is specifically working in drugs trade also. So, sorry. So, as you can see, this is a very a small table with all those agreements or initiatives I mentioned before, and the countries which are members or associates with each kind of those agreements. And you can see the lot of white color in the white means that there is not involved in this kind of agreement. So you can see the lot of white in this table. Just UN or OAS or CARICOMs move lot of the countries, or include a lot of the countries in the region, but the other initiatives do not include all those countries. So we find here that we have some different facilitators for the crime in the Caribbean region. For the poor socioeconomic and political environment is one of the facilitators. The dispute water jurisdictional zones are also very interesting in this sense. The favorable geography is also a facilitator. We have conflict and disorder in the coastal countries. You know that right now Venezuela is a country where the political system are made that many people are trying to leave Venezuela, and also many people are being involved in some criminal activities. And we have a very interesting maritime tradition, which also facilitate the involvement of culture of some people in this type of activities. Is the case, for example, in the Pacific area of Colombia, we have a lot of maritime tradition in fisheries, and the drug trade organization use that kind of knowledge to obviously poor people, and they use them such as navigators in the semi-submersible and also as in this fast boats coming from the departing from the Pacific region. So we have also some kind of problems in terms of educational and criminal effectiveness versus a low impact of law enforcement activity. And it's where we find that internationally, all these problems has very important international incidents in the region. And for that, we need to try to work in international cooperation, trying to solve problem of trust, problem of sovereignty, and information sharing problems. And obviously, the international cooperation needs to work in restrictions such as surveillance, assets availability, and intelligence capability. Because it's the way we can find that we can enforce law and make prosecution more effective, and then we can reduce organized maritime crime in the region. So to resume and start to finishing, the complexity of the Caribbean Basin is very important. There are a bunch of multilateral and bilateral agreements. The regional maritime security complex is leading by United States and is very strong leading in the region. There are many common security needs against maritime crime activities. There are problems between collective security and cooperative security and the way they are functioning in the region. We have problems between cooperation and competition because we have problems in maritime disputes between some countries. We are not articulating in the strategic, operational, and tactical level in the region. So we need to make efforts to create a regional maritime strategy. It's completely different. For example, with us, European nation, the European Union has his own maritime security strategy for all the European Union. We don't have that kind of agreement. And trust building is a key point in maritime security international cooperation in the region. The management indicators are mostly based on tactical result and not the fulfillment of strategic objectives. And it's another very important is how much or how many tons of cocaine is seized each year. Is not the impact on the organizations. The need to develop a map of operational indicators that go beyond the tactical scope and achieve strategic effectiveness is very important to try to discuss multi-level decision-making objectives in the region. And it's not just on UNCLOS. It's not just on UNCLOS, but because in the region there is a lot of customary law, and the common jurisdictional law. So we need to work on all those senses. We need to discuss issues about who is in charge. In Latin America, in the Latin American region, in the Spanish countries of the Latin American region, many of the navies are in charge of combat crime in Americas. So we need to start to other kind of discussion is human rights or humanitarian international law, for example, because we need to start to discuss if we are disputing the territories and the maritime domain with the criminal organization or what kind of organization we are combat. And finally, it's necessary to increase the presence and permanence in blue waters. Right now, we have a lot of naval and coast guard assets in the coastal region, in the coastal zone. But in the blue waters, we have just US or EU assets. So we need to have more, increase the participation of different countries in activities in the blue waters. And finally, we can say and assume that we have lack of familiarity in emerging and evolving maritime security threats in the region. We have weak articulation on international cooperation, and we need to make efforts to improve and to increase in that kind of cooperation. mechanisms in intelligence, as I mentioned before. So we can say that we need for strategic communications, intelligence-driven approach, new maritime law enforcement capacities, regional information sharing mechanisms, and mutual legal assistance to combat crime in the region. So I finished it. Is just, I think that I took more time that I have, so I finish it here.
Thank you very much, Sam. You've got all the time in the world because this is a very, very timely subject, and I appreciate you giving us the rundown. Two things that stand out is I very much appreciate your dynamic systems analysis approach, if only to give it some sense other than just counting ships or counting problems. So that's something that we'll certainly revisit, if not in the Q&A, then us in our work. And second of all, thank you for reminding us that there's a few NATO members, Canada and the US, but also in Europe, that always will have to have at least one eye on the Caribbean because of the geographic issues and the post-colonial history and whatnot, and the cultural relations. And that's a good reminder for everyone who's now, especially in this country, in Germany, you know, the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea is back, but the rest of the world, the rest of the maritime focus areas is still there, and that's something we'll take in our discussion. So thank you once again, and Rafael, now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sebastian. I'm going, first of all, share my presentation. Okay, now it should work right now. Good. So yes, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for having me here today, for the kind invitation. As you, Sebastian, have already mentioned, I studied peace and conflict studies in Magdeburg, and since my time at the Center for Maritime Strategy and Security in Kiel, I started to focus on maritime security and specifically on the particularities of international security cooperation of the Colombian Navy. So I have written already some pieces about it. So I'm summarizing here my findings and my argument as far as I have elaborated, not only as a maritime expert or like an aspiring maritime expert, but also as somebody who has who makes also research and is very interested in the post-conflict and peace building, and how to make a more sustainable security forces, and of course naval forces in the Pacific and in the Caribbean in this case. So being that said, first of all, probably the first association we have when we talk about is the Colombian Navy is probably soldiers and sailors busting drugs and degrading security transnational threats on water, which actually it's true, but it's not only that. The Colombian Navy has basically focused on countering those threats in the Pacific and in the Caribbean, but it also has developed what is called this internationalization, and has this security cooperation dimension developed in a very particular way, which well, it's quite interesting to analyze. So I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I think the work, these efforts to internationalize the security as made by the Colombian Navy has many strong points, but it has at least three very particular problems. Namely, it lacks of adequate ships, so vessels, it had problems with the budget and with problems with the personnel. So I'm basically developing argument in the following way. So first of all, I'm going to develop a little bit, like very briefly, the latest strategic document, the Naval Development Plan 2042. Next, I'm going to talk in a very briefly way about the activities of the Colombian Navy in international cooperation. And afterwards, I'm going to, well, to talk about these three particular problems I think are threatening the sustainability of the Navy in the coming years. And then at the end, I'm going to summarize my main findings. And then afterwards, I will be looking forward for the discussion. So first of all, the Naval Development Plan 2042 is the latest strategic plan by the Colombian Navy, published last year, and it's basically the result of a long chain of work and strategic plans as elaborated by the Colombian Navy. The Colombian Navy does basically 5 things, and I think the best way to summarize these activities are through the Naval Pentagon, which are those 5 main areas. For instance, maritime safety, sea policing, also of course, second, the issues on national security and national defense. Environmental security is also a cornerstone of the Colombian Navy, but also how the Navy can contribute to the development to the country's development, which usually means, for instance, partnering, like looking ways, entry points with the private sector to foster certain economic sectors in the country, but also in the delivering of humanitarian aid and aid relief in areas when, because of natural disaster or man-made activities, we have humanitarian disaster. And finally, we have this so-called international projection, Proyección Internacional, which is basically a transversal area which focuses on export, on share some of the knowledge of know-how the security forces, and in this case the Navy, has developed, and in context of the armed conflict in the last 20 years, 25 years, but like concrete, like at least since 2001. This is what it's called the success story, the idea that Colombia is not only a receptor of military aid, but that the security forces have developed certain capabilities and certain abilities which can and should be exported to other countries in similar problems. So this will be my starting point. The military in its international dimension justifies its activity on this assumption. There is something we can export, and there is something that others can profit from. And I think it's in this context where we should understand some proposals and some strategic objectives as made in the Naval Development Plan. For instance, and I'm going to focus on these 3. First of all, this personal increase to 40,000 people. The Navy currently has 31,000 people as women and men, soldiers, sailors. And second, I'm going to focus on this new procurement program, PROCION, which are like all of them encompassed under the name PROCION. And finally, this idea of a Navy of regional outreach. So when we look at the activities, like what is being understood under the idea of the regional outreach, we have to look into the past and have a brief look of what the Colombian Navy is actually doing. And I'm going to separate in 3 areas. So basically, first of all, cooperation with the US, cooperation with Europe, and cooperation with multilateral organizations. So when it comes to the US, probably one of the most important activities, like the when seen by the impact, are the triangular cooperations. The triangular cooperation is this concept under which the US provides funding, the Colombians provide training, as manpower the missions, and both of them train a third country, usually a Central American country, in several areas of expertise. When it comes to the Navy, we have this example: naval intelligence, special operation forces, communications, and riverine operations. According to the Ministry of Defense, there have been at least 2,059 activities, and and the Ministry of Defense has trained 23,000 people abroad, or at least coming from foreign militaries. Last year was particular because, as you know, because of the pandemic, the usual numbers of this training dramatically fell. So the numbers were actually quite less as usual. Other activities in the Caribbean, but also not in the Caribbean, encompass, of course, naval exercises. There are, of course, bilateral agreements with almost every single country in the Caribbean. There are naval exercises, participation in UNITAS, which is one of the largest regional naval and amphibious exercises in the region. There is also participation in the Rim of the Pacific exercise, and also in additional anti-submarine exercises, and also this project of expanding, of having a permanent Antarctic presence before 2050. So the ultimate objective of the Colombian Navy is trying to becoming a consulting partner as part of the Antarctic Treaty. So the way how the Navy is contributing is by deploying one patrol vessel since at least 2014, and having a permanent presence in form of a research camp. And finally, when it comes to Europe, there are some activities, some frameworks which are of interest. For instance, the Atalanta Ocean Shield, participation in Atalanta and Ocean Shield, which actually constituted a very important milestone for Colombia to become a NATO global partner in 2018. Also, cooperation with the Spanish Navy is actually also very important. We know, according to the Navy's Management Report 2020, that there is actually interest to still having at least one officer as observer as part of the Atalanta operation. That may suggest that there is actually a strategic interest of Colombia to have probably some kind of vessel, some kind of unit there as part of this internationalization strategy. Peacekeeping operations is also other area. There are actually not many peacekeepers currently, but there is a certain interest, and there are some initiatives. For instance, CENCOPAS, which is the Navy's School for Peacekeepers. Operación Orion is also a very important milestone, and basically the intention to integrate these efforts in the Caribbean with the US and other countries in the Caribbean, more with Europe. So there is actually already some degree of cooperation with European countries, but not bad. But the intention in the future is to consolidate this kind of coordination of assets, police and military assets, to stop drugs. Well, now, from a Colombian viewpoint, this is actually impressive. So many of these activities were not happening before 2001. But at the same time, this has confronted the Navy with certain challenges, which I think, in my opinion, they are not being like that discussed, like very well discussed, but they are nevertheless really, really important to understand if the Navy could be actually sustainable in the future. So I'm going to start with the first issue, which is budget. And basically, Colombia spends annually since the last years about 10 billion US dollars in defense. It's actually like the largest or the second largest budget item. And out of this item, out of this defense item, the Navy has approximately 7% participation in this budget, which is not precisely the lion's share in defense budget. Is still a little bit larger than the Air Force budget, but about almost 4 times smaller than the Army, with 26%, or the National Police. So we have at the outset, like, not a priority. The Navy is not precisely like seen by budget. It is not precisely a priority for the Minister of Defense. Now, when we look then within the Navy budget, we have two interesting trends and concerning trends. First of all, at the left, we have this graph, this diagram, and I want that we all look at the green line. The green line refers to the personal spending. And basically, it tells us that the personal spending has dramatically increased, steadily increased since 2003. And at the same time, the blue line, the red line represents the procurement item, and which has actually, like, as seen in million pesos in local currency, has kept steadily. Now, when we look to the right, we can see the proportion. So what kind of how is that proportion? How are these budget items in proportion? And then again, in the orange, in orange, we can see that again the personal spending increases, and at the same time, the blue color represents again the procurement item, and this procurement budget item has decreased approximately by half between 2002 and 2020. So we have basically 2 things: personal spending is increasing and procurement is decreasing. Now, this is important when we look at the plans, at the procurement plans as laid out by the Colombian Navy. So the Colombian Navy has a considerable fleet, an old fleet as well, composed by 8 main combatants, 4 German frigates and 4 German-made submarines, about 61 petrol and coastal combatants, 21 amphibious vessels, and additional logistics and support vessels. Now, what is here important are the main combatants and some of the patrol vessels, because they need to be replaced now, so some of them now, and others at some time in the future. So in order to counter or to replace the whole fleet, the Colombian Navy has stated in some strategic documents that it's important to have this set of capabilities, mainly maritime awareness, anti-aircraft capabilities, but also amphibious operations, and some attention to littoral defense. For the Navy currently, and according to the Naval Development Plan 2020, it's important to have at least these assets in order to keep the fleet capable and sustainable, in order to execute operations it need to do. So currently it has 4 frigates. In the future, it plans to have at least 5 frigates. Originally, by 2014 to 2015, with the Páez program, Páez program is the program to replace the frigates. It wanted actually 8 frigates and between 3,500 and 5,000 displacement tons. Now it has reduced those plans to 5 frigates between 3,000 and about 3,500 tons, if we are to believe the talk of the town, which is basically the discussion in some Spanish-speaking fora. Well, it also plans to have to replace the whole submarine fleet, to add 2 maritime patrol vessels, and replace the 4 main patrol vessels. And interestingly, it plans also to add 2 landing dock ships. Maybe for them who are for the first time in this kind of discussion, maritime issues, landing dock ships are vessels with the capability, with the ability to transport troops, to launch helicopters, and deploy deploy amphibious vehicles. Well, but also when we talk about, and then I wish to focus on these amphibious capabilities, because it's something it's relatively new. It's something the Navy wants to do, but I think there are also some problems with that. So in order to understand that, and I hope I can count on more additional minutes before I end. The Navy, as I have already stated, has 31,500 people, in a rather decreasing tendency, when at least seen since 2010. This is proportional. Like, this is very similar to the budget trend we have already seen at the beginning, and many of those 31,500 people are, well, in a larger extent, made up of Marines, of Colombian Marines. Currently, and according to the Naval Development Plan, there are 16,000 Marines, about half. And the Colombian Navy, so first of all, has the intention to increase this number, like the total number of Navy members, to 40,000, and to increase the number of Marines from 60,000 to 21,000. The question would be, why? It is not very clear, so at least in the analysis I have done, in the reading, as seen in the strategic documents, it's not quite clear what kind of reasoning is behind that. We have already seen there are problems with the procurement, and there are also problems with the budget. Finally, and with this point, probably I'm going to finish. When we look in detail to the Navy, to the Marines units, we actually do not see that dramatic change. The number of battalions remain basically the same. For instance, the Rivera battalions, so the Navy say, okay, we are going to have 1 additional Rivera battalion by 2042. And our Marine battalions, we have to transfer them, and they're going to be either defense coast battalions or amphibious battalions, which is actually very it's proportional what it has already been written in the other strategic documents. We want to have these amphibious capabilities, but what is not quite clear is where are the additional 5,000 men they want to have by 2042. Are the battalions going to grow? What is the change? Is that this is a point I don't quite understand. I don't understand what is the strategic thinking and the strategic logic behind that. So finally, I have started this presentation asking the question, is the Colombian Navy at odds? And I think yes, the Navy is at odds. There are very serious problems. And it's important to think in a very creative way how to sort them out. So we have already seen there are certain ambitions in international cooperation. There are, but at the same time, challenges in budget, procurement, and personnel. And therefore, what I see in the whole thing is basically a strategic uncertainty. There is not that many change, at least in a qualitative way. I don't see a discussion, for example, on the role of drones. I don't see a discussion about the role of the Pacific, which, as many of us know, is going to increase in the coming years. Or, for example, today it's International Women's Day. I don't see much of that reflection on the woman and the role of woman, or maybe on ethnic communities in Colombia. How many Navy officers are there, for example, from San Andres Islands? So reality is tough. And finally, again, coming to the topic of the troops and the role of the Marines, I think it's important to strike a balance between quantity and quality. Currently, the Marines are strongly focused on these riveting capabilities, which is impressive, but also wants amphibious capabilities. And I do not think that's possible. I think it's important to reevaluate the options, actually, and reevaluate also the threats and what the troops are doing in the littoral. Again, and yeah, finally, COVID-19 is also very huge factor. We can, as of the talk of the town in Colombia right now is that the Colombian economy has suffered a drawback of about 10 years. Poverty has increased, and this will have a huge effect on defense budget. So this is another factor in the future, and I think we will see consequences of COVID on defense budget and, of course, on defense procurement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rafael, for this. And for allowing us an insight into Colombian naval thinking. Once again, yet another country that manages to have a naval plan, a naval strategy, whereas Germany, and I see Heinz Dieter is in agreement, Germany is not doing so well in terms of capstone documents. And of course, I very much appreciate your reference to the International Women's Day. It is actually a holiday in Berlin, in the state of Berlin, which means those individuals who work in Berlin are off today. I guess that's why some of them are not here, some of the usual suspects. But of course, that's a totally different matter. Well, we have about 30 minutes for Q&As, and I'll get us started as everyone thinks about something, a question or a comment that they may have. My question to Sam is, I want to invite you to speculate a little bit about the future of Venezuela. What would a state collapse in Venezuela, what kind of maritime implications or implications on the Caribbean would that event have, sensing full well that it might not happen, or there might be a peaceful transition. And of course, this is something that you as regional specialists are much more well versed in than we could ever be in Europe. And Rafael, while you may also want to give us your 2 cents on what the state collapse, what a potential collapse or violent dissension of Venezuela might mean for Colombia, I want to pose a different question to you. Colombia almost looks a little bit like Germany in that it has 2 maritime areas that are geographically separated by land. whereas Germany has the Baltic Sea and the North Sea. It's the Caribbean and the the Pacific Ocean, excuse me, for Colombia. My question to you is: are there two different mindsets, sort of a Pacific mindset in Colombia and the Caribbean that the Navy and those who think about the Navy and work for the Navy have to bring together? Or is it, as in Germany, that the continentalists, the land power specialists, sensing that there's a lot of land border for Colombia as well, they have the upper hand, and everyone who's doing naval studies or having a naval mind needs to rise beyond these geographic issues? So those are the two questions I invite you to respond to. Perhaps Sam first.
Okay, Sebastian, thank you for your question, but I love to have a crystal ball in that sense and say something about Venezuela. I don't really want to speculate too much about that. You know that it's a very crucial and very particular topic in the region right now. I think that unfortunately the Venezuelan authorities have lost the control of their waters. And in some sense they have reduced a lot the surveillance of their waters, and they have big problems in the Gulf of Maracaibo with fisheries communities and robbery, and a lot of people died in that sense. They have problems in the border with Trinidad and Tobago. And already they are the main problem in drug trade in the Caribbean region, sending boats, fast boats and semi-submersibles in. It's a very complicated word in English. Semi-submersibles in for Europe and other regions, Africa and other parts of the world. I'm not seeing a political change in the short run. I think that we need to. Venezuela is also important for Russia, and for Iran, and for other extra-regional powers, which are very interested in what is happening in Venezuela. So I think in the short run and in the medium run, we are going to still have the problem of the political instability of Venezuela, and what that political instability make to the security, the regional security complex in the region, in the Caribbean. So I'm not seeing really, I'm not seeing many changes in Venezuela in the short or the medium run. Maybe in a long run we can have some changes, but speculating, I think that we will remain with the same situation for a while.
I would definitely agree with that diagnosis. I would even add some two elements to that discussion, and maybe also the role of the human trafficking and the environmental threats. So we have already seen there was a tank vessel stranded somehow in the Caribbean before the Venezuelan Caribbean shore. It represented a risk to nature, to flora and fauna. In a very positive way, the vessel could be saved and could be salvaged, and there was no oil spill or something of the sort. So, but the thing is, there is a huge oil infrastructure on Caribbean shores, and they have the risk to deteriorate and occasioning more of that. And probably because of the migration, of this transnational migration, we are actually seeing that also in the Caribbean, people trying to emigrate to Colombia in Caribbean waters, and that means unregulated, unsafe practices. So in a hypothetical case, as Sebastian is proposing, that would be increased. When it comes to Colombia and the difference between the Pacific and the Caribbean, yes, there is definitely a huge difference because of historical reasons. Usually, this the part of the shore who is located at the Caribbean coast are definitely more developed. There are these 3 largest cities on shores are at the Caribbean. In the Pacific, on the other side, we have only 1 city, Buenaventura, the only like the largest port in the Pacific, and probably the only one with the right capabilities and right capacities for trade and for trade vessels. Historically, this region has been abandoned. It has not received the adequate state investment. So yeah, so there is this contradiction that the Pacific is increasingly more important, but at the same time, in Colombia, as a potential ally in the future, is the Pacific not? It does not have the adequate resources. So for the national economy.
Thank you. Very interesting indeed.
Bastian,
yes, go ahead.
If I can make a small comment about what Rafael has mentioned before, I have to say that the geography of the Pacific is completely different of the geography of the Caribbean region in Colombia. Particularly the Colombian Pacific area region is very biodiversity, is very rich in biodiversity. It's one of the more biodiverse regions in the world right now. So that's why obviously any investment of the state in that region is very interesting and very important. And right now, the Colombian defense policy has mentioned the environmental issues as our environmental assets as a strategic assets of the country. And it's because Colombia is the 3rd biodiverse country in the world. So if we see how the geography plays in the maritime domain awareness or the maritime domain management in each region is completely different. The Caribbean region obviously has, as Rafael mentioned, has the 3 main ports for containers in the Colombian economy. But the Buenaventura port moves around 60% of the Colombian cargos. So it's completely different. It's very particular. It's very interesting. And obviously, because it's a coast with a lot of mangroves, the drugs trade organization use that particularity of the geography to produce to build the semi-submersibles. I want to complicate myself. The different platforms to send drugs to other countries. So it's very particular. I think that is very is completely different than Germany, because Germany is a small country with 2 different areas, but very similar in development and in terms of economy. The Pacific region is very poor, and the Caribbean region is very rich. So it's completely different. I want to mention that. Thank you.
As everybody should know, of course, the Baltic Sea area is much more beautiful than the North Sea, but that's just my personal opinion, obviously. And I appreciate both of these comments. We have 2 speakers, or 2 people who want to ask questions. And the first is Andrea Resende. And if I could ask you to briefly introduce yourself, just say where you're from, and that'll be enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brans. Hi, everyone. Good day. I'm Andrea Resende. I am PhD candidate here in Brazil at the PUC Minas, Pontifical Catholic University of Minas Gerais. I'll be the speaker of the next panel. And without spoiling much of the next of my presentation, I would ask Rafael, but Professor Rivera as well, about the cause of the budgetary issues in Colombia. I see in the case of the Brazilian Navy that a lot of the budgetary issues here are caused by institutional sea blindness, because these problems are not being discussed in these political institutions, and they need to be discussed because the investments for our Navy are being constrained year after year as the personnel are being expanded. And I think this is a problem with the Colombian Navy as well. What do you think about this as a possible cause of the problem?
You go first.
Just in order to check if I understand right, so you are asking what is the institutional cause of sea blindness? Is that your question?
Yes, if you think that is a cause of the budgetary issue, because as the politicians are not discussing the reform of the budget, it is remained the same since like 2 decades or 3 decades in the case of Brazil. We see this problem affecting the Navy in the case of investments. Every time they're trying to step forward to build vessels or to invest in new vessels or invest in Marines, as the case of Brazil, they are facing these constraints every time. So I would like to see what you think about it. If it is the case of Colombia as well in Brazil.
Samuel, if I may, I would like to start being in this case a little bit optimistic, and and I would like to highlight the efforts of the Armada Nacional of the Colombian Navy in promoting this idea of maritime consciousness, so maritime awareness, and in order to promote the national interests of the country, in the country but also abroad. And this is also part of the national strategy in the last years. And you can see that like the Navy has been doing efforts to promote a brand, to promote certain catchy slogans in media, but also in institutional level. And well, I think that's positive. I mean, like, you have at least one institution talking about that with certain regional, like national outreach. And let me just put one example, and I think the Antarctic expeditions are a very good example, because nobody was talking actually about the Antarctic before 2016, 2015 probably. Please correct me, Samuel, if I'm wrong. But it was like since this last year, since 2015, when the Navy began to co-produce television programs, TV ads, also to promote through social media, and also to build networks with civilian institutions interested in making research, like oceanographic research. And I think they have tried to build these networks, and at least an example of the Antarctic expedition is working at a certain level, and it has some kind of future. I cannot say that's happening in every single sector where the Navy has a stake, but I mean, you can identify the stakes, the individual initiatives, and at a certain degree they are working. Of course, there is a lot to be done, but I think it's important to have this selective vision, like to know to identify at least the strategies and the tools, because I think at least in the case of Colombia, the tools are there, the interest is there, the political will, or at least the institutional will to overcome sea blindness is there.
Well, Andrea, thank you for your question. I think I will say something that could be very, very complex, but I was very surprised when Professor Geoffrey Till mentioned here in Colombia in a conference some years ago that Britain suffered from sea blindness. And at that moment, I start to think something about the seaplanes concept. And I think that I think that it's overrated. The concept of seaplanes could be overrated because each country start to develop his sea when start to see the sea in some sense, and it's not it's hard to understand when a country start to develop the seas in a good way. In the case of Colombia, I think that is very interesting what is happening from the 1990s and since the 1990s to today. In the 1990s, Colombia issued the national policy, the maritime national policy, and it's one of the national policies that becomes like a public policy, public state policy. It's not a governmental, it's not a government policy, it's a state policy. And the result, for example, is that the President Duque has included the ocean region as a region of development in the national development plan of his government. And the last year, the Colombian main committee of social and economic policies issue one document. It's a Compass 3990, which is the policy for a bioceanic country for the next 10 years, and it includes budgetary issues, it includes development issues, it includes environmental issues. It's very interesting because it's a public policy which is supported for the public administrators and is supported for the policymakers in Colombia. So right now, I think that it's very interesting how is the maritime governance has been developed in the Colombian case. Yeah, I think that it could be very interesting for countries such as Brazil, Colombia, Peru, Chile, and that kind of countries.
Thank you very much. We have two more speakers, and in light of the rapidly moving time, I will close the speakers list for now. But we have two individuals who have questions, and the first one is by Commander of the German Navy, Páez. And before he has the floor, I will ask him to please give my regards to Commander Andre Pecha next time you see him, or next time you chat with him down in Lima. So that was my personal intervention here. But Commander, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. Special to Samuel and Rafael for this very, very interesting presentations. To my person, maybe if you can see it, I'm the German defense attaché here in Colombia, and we are working very closely with the Navy, not only with education material as well, and participation in the different kind of operations. However, as we heard, we have a big problem at the moment about money, invest, which is needed, and as well, the presentation and the presence of Russian and Chinese here in this region. Not only on a business market, we have a lot of the Russians call it trawler, but trawler without a net, and a lot of antennas in the Caribbean Sea are not really fishing. We have a lot of presence of these two nations in this area and a lot of interest. My question about this is, with the problems of COVID, running out of money in the government, with a lack of possibilities to invest or reinvest in the Navy vessel, are we running in a difficult situation in the future here in this area when Europe and NATO not will focus in the future a little bit more on this area? Thank you.
Well, Commander, it's an excellent question. I think that I have an example of cooperation that I think that could be, I think that your question in some sense could be linked with the question of Heinz-Dieter Job. He questioned to me saying, what about the common maritime domain awareness in the region? And I say that obviously, first of all, we have to recognize that United States is the main power state in the region and is the leader of the maritime security complex in the region. But I say that I have to say that I would like that the European Union will be more involved in the region, because Dutch presence, because French presence, because German presence with assets, many of the ships that you have in the region comes from Dutch and German. And I have an example that could be very interesting. For example, in Colombian shipyard, Cotecmar, start to build some vessels with the participation of the German and the Dutch industries. But when Colombia tried to sell that type of vessels to other countries, we have problems of rights with the shipyards of German, of Dutch. Obviously, it could be very obvious. It's obvious. If the right is from one German or Dutch shipyard, could be very clear, or is very clear that you have to deal with those kind of things. But I think that we have to enhance the capabilities of the countries in the region with technological support, and we have to start to think in a regional mechanism, really in a regional mechanism to fight all the problems in the region. If China has made a lot of investments in the region, obviously they have right now a lot of ports in the region is managed for the Chinese people, and Russia has a lot of influence in some countries, such as Venezuela, such as Nicaragua, such as Cuba, and it obviously they want to remain strong in that countries. So I think that the main way to try to balance powers here is start to balance the power of Brazil, the balance of power of Colombia, the balance of power of some countries of the region, which could help the strong powers of the world or the main economies to work in the region in building trust. We need to build trust between the countries in the region. That's the main and the most important task we have together. I think so.
I would like to that. So first of all, thank you very much for the question, Commander Krempchen. I would like to add that in relation to the role of the European Union and security threats in the Caribbean, and in this case in Colombia, I think it's actually important to seriously consider the role of the European Union in Venezuela. I think somehow trying to increase investment for refugees coming from Venezuela to Colombia would be the right step to enhance to increase stability in the country. And of course, so we know, so with migration, there are also other kind of, there are new dynamics, not only concerning to the people in need, but also with people which profits from those in need. And I think a very practical entry point for the European Union in order to counter these threats, which represent Russia and China, is actually looking at a little bit more at the people and the institutional capacity of Colombia right now, which is actually, yeah, it needs support in that regard. And I think that could be an entry point, and that's something that the European Union actually can do very well.
Thank you, gentlemen. The final question from Heinz-Dieter Jopp.
Yeah, thank you, all of us, and specifically both for your excellent presentations. I'm former captain of the German Navy. I'm a retired. I'm now writing some articles, writing some books. I edited Maritime Security in the 21st century. And in that direction, my question, and having seen it on the slide from Sam, the question is for the region, and therefore the question to the maritime domain awareness, but maritime domain awareness in an understanding, it's not just a maritime domain for the gray ships of the world, it's a maritime domain for all of us. That means including the ships of the border police, including Coast Guard ships and others. And you argued for the European Union, and I think we have a common ground, the European Union and the countries in the region, not only Colombia, the countries in the region and the European Union, we have a common ground, fighting drug trafficking. And fighting drug trafficking, it can be started, in my understanding, in a real good way with a picture of what is really happening in the region, on the seas, before they are trafficking via the oceans and coming to either Africa or the Europe and to the different countries of the European Union. That is one thing. The other thing is we have an elephant in the room, and that is the fishery fleet of China. So why not start also with a maritime domain awareness, a basis, an operational picture? Where are these fish trawlers of China, and what you are in your understanding can you do together with different countries in the region, maybe, hopefully, to fight this illegal fishery in the future? Thanks.
Heinz, thank you very much for your question. I think that we have to split your question into different answers. First of all, I think I agree. I totally agree with you in terms of maritime domain awareness and what we looking for with maritime domain awareness. And in that sense, I say that to me is very interesting the maritime security architecture that you have in the European Union have done in the past. So because you have integrate all the communication systems and you have information and you have confidential information, but you have public information in that architecture, and you have created a common maritime authority, and you have a common maritime security architecture and picture, and to me it's very important to get that for the Caribbean region. If we can get that in the Caribbean region, we have a central fusion center, for example, for intelligence, and that's why I mentioned before that we need to change the results. Right now we have like a approach that is just scissors. How many scissors you have in drug trade? We need to start to think in intelligence-driven approach, because the intelligence will give us the elements and the way to dispute control for criminal organization. That's the first thing, and it's a gray zone because you have many navies working in police activities. So that's kind of it's a kind of difficult because it starts to have a problem. That's why I put my slides about is the militarization or militarization of the military seas. Is that if you have navies working as a coast guard, you need to have police jurisdiction, and not all country has the same architecture in the public institutions, and there are many gray areas in that sense. And the problem with the Chinese fleet is completely different. You are not going to find a problem in the Caribbean with Chinese vessels, because, as I mentioned, all the Caribbean waters are very close and are with jurisdictional waters of some country. All countries have some jurisdictional waters in the Caribbean. We have problems in the Atlantic area. Brazil, Argentina has problems with Chinese fleets, and we have the same problem in the Pacific Ocean, because we have the fleet of the Chinese in the 201 mile. We have the problems in Colombia. We have the problem in Ecuador. We have the problem with Peru, and we have the problem with Chile. And that's why I say those topics are completely different. And obviously, I agree with you. We need to start working together, dissolving all the problems of communication and trust we have, because we have problems with Nicaragua, and Colombia has problems with Nicaragua. Venezuela has problems with many of the islands because of the island of Los Aves. And we need to obviously change the mindset of many of how we see the problem in the region, I think. But maritime domain awareness is a very key issue to start.
Rafael, do you want to add something to it?
I just wanted to say I could not agree more with someone.
Well placed, well placed. Well, incidentally, this Thursday we will have a session where both Andrea will speak, one of two female presenters. Very proud of that. The other one will be, and relates to the subject of the Chinese fishing fleets, is Professor Tabitha Grace Melleroy from the University of Washington. And Hendrik in a minute will put the there you go. He's put the link to register for Thursday into the chat box, and you're all cordially invited to register, to send it on to your friends and colleagues, and to participate in Thursday's session. You can rewatch the proceedings of this event and the recording in the next few days. We'll put it up on YouTube and on our kielseapowerseries.com website. Once again, follow us on Twitter at ISPK_org and at Kiel Seapower Series. And finally, Lutz Mertschat has given us some homework to do, especially those Europeans. And he has asked, or he has put the issue forward, asking, do we need, and I quote, do we need something like the Indo-Pacific guidelines for Colombia, Latin America, as well as to develop the relationships between Germany and Colombia, South America? Rhetorically asking, it would help to justify combined exercises, and Damen is facilitating something like that similarly as well. To which I will offer the two following thoughts. I was once part of a German-Norwegian strategic dialogue that a few years ago that I will not say it led to the joint German-Norwegian submarine procurement, but it also didn't obstruct it. And I know that the MOD in Germany was considering a German-Colombian strategic dialogue back in 2017, 2018, but that didn't go anywhere. If it went anywhere, I wasn't invited, and I've never heard of it again. So maybe it did go somewhere. We don't know. But of course, I would cordially invite both MTG and Damen, if you want to fund the ISPK for setting up such a dialogue, you're more than welcome to do so. And I think Heinz-Dieter Jopp and others have some great ideas for that. But I'll leave it at that. That's once again an opportunity to thank our speakers. There's a little function at the bottom of the screen called reactions, so you can clap, you can cheer for them, you can send something their way as a way of thanking them, and that leaves me to thank you for participating, for asking questions, and hopefully you will stay safe and healthy both mentally and physically in these testing times. Yeah, have a great Monday and a great rest of the week. Bye bye.